I am super excited to welcome our latest podcast guest, Gin Lalli. Hello, Gin.
Hello, Paul. Thank you so much for having me along.
Thank you for joining us. I'm excited. I've been talking to lots of people about this podcast, and I'm excited around your approach and the dialogue we've had. But before we get in, and how that differs from the approach I've seen up to now in and around the mental health space, but we'll get into that in a second. If you could, just for the audience, if you could give us a general introduction, bit of background, and how you ended up here in this space.
Yep. So I'm a psychotherapist, which just means I talk for therapy. It's a talking therapy. That's all it means. It's a big, complicated word. And I specialize in anxiety, stress, which very closely related to depression, fears, and phobias as well. So I work online over Zoom, but I'm based in Edinburgh. And I work solely online over Zoom, and I just love it. The reason I do what I do now is I used to be an optician. Bear with me here, Paul. Where's
the link? Where's the link?
There's a link. It's tenuous, but it's there. So I used to see when you go to the opticians, we look inside the back of your eyes, and often we can pick up things like high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, heart disease. And I just used to love chatting to people as well. And you'd hear people's stories. And when I used to look at the back of someone's eye and say, well, I think you need your blood pressure checked. There's your blood vessels, they used to look quite wiggly. If they're very wiggly, you send people off for a blood pressure check. And they used to say, I've had quite a lot of stress recently, so I'm not surprised my blood pressure actually might be high. What you're saying doesn't surprise me. And so, they would go off, and type 2 diabetes follows on from high blood pressure and heart disease. So I used to think, now it's starting to affect your general health. But the actual reason I do what I do is because I used to see, it not because of those people, I used to see people who are very well. People in their 70s, 80s who had also had a long story of stress. Because we've all had stress, right?
All of us.
We've all had something going on.
Yep.
No one's living in a fairy tale here right now. But there's these people, Paul, aren't they amazing? They can cope.
Yes.
They've got resilience.
Yes.
Like, who are these people? We need to bottle what they've got. And that's who I want to study. That's who I study, and that's why I do what I do now.
And again, this is why I'm excited about the podcast, because whenever we talk about mental health in society, I would say 9 times out of 10, probably more, you're going to get the focus on the challenges and the issues and the diagnosis and the impact, but nobody seems to want to learn from the resilient folk around their coping mechanisms, their ability to be resilient and to prevent and mitigate those crisis situations. On the just deviation, because the optician piece, right? So I had a big scare when I was younger. Gas permeable lenses when they were hard.
Yes.
So
you're showing your age now.
Okay, sorry. Let's skip over that bit. So I was a young lad, 12, 13, and I forgot to take them out one night. But here's the thing. There was no impact. So I got up, I went to school, I came back, and I thought, well, I can just keep them in. I don't need to take them out and clean them every day. There's no, I don't feel bad and I can still see. And my goodness, so I eventually got to an optician and the vessels had creep alert. The vessels had started to grow into the seeing part of the eye. So immediately taken off me, wasn't responsible enough. And we'll come on to accountability in a second. But that was, I've got to mention it because the optician link. So mental health in general then, what are you seeing out there in terms of trajectory or specific symptoms and issues that are prevalent today that perhaps weren't prevalent 5, 10, 20 years ago? Is there a trend, or are we just seeing more of the same?
Oh, such a good question, Paul. I think it was as prevalent in the past. It's just that we've got the language for it now. We've got the words.
So it's communication that's changed.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. We've got the words for it. We've got the language and we're talking about it more. So people had depression before. People had anxiety years ago. It's just that they didn't know how to put it into words and not communicating it, thinking, well, I must be the only person with this. PTSD from World War I, World War II.
Yeah.
PTSD, hugely common.
And it wasn't talked about you think mainly because of the language, or because of a mix of language and potential stigma out there as well?
Stigma and culture.
And culture.
We're in a different culture now, aren't we?
Yes.
And it's across the board now, things like diversity as well. We're talking about it more. We've got language for it now, and the more people talk about it, the better. So I've got nothing against mental health awareness days and months and weeks that we do. But we're not talking about action. We've got a lot of awareness now. We need the next step. What are we going to do moving forward from the awareness?
Okay. And are there any, so that's a great step forward, right? And I think we're still on that journey, right? I think more and more people are gradually becoming comfortable talking about mental health. And I think the penny's dropping with the understanding that mental health, every single person has it, and it can be good, it can be bad. And just because you're in either one of those states, it doesn't mean that that's not going to change. And that could change short term and it could flip, or it could change long term. So you can't get comfortable wherever you are. But I think absolutely people are beginning to talk about it. And that's a helpful thing because it encourages others as well. So are there any pockets that you're seeing specific issues in? I know you specialize in the anxiety space. Is that affecting a particular type of person more than any other, or again, does it not discriminate and it can just hit anyone at any time?
Yeah, can hit anyone at any time. I think we've had a bit of a post-COVID effect, especially with young people.
Yeah.
So students, teenagers, children, the whole post-COVID thing of not being able to socialize, mix. So a lot of social anxiety I'm seeing in that group, that age group, students. Graduating students, less social skills for getting a job. They want to now live happily ever after. I've done all my hard work. I've done all my exams. Got my degree. Now I want to have the perfect relationship and the perfect job and the perfect house.
Where's my prize? I've worked so hard. Where's my prize? Absolutely. Yeah.
And that could be something that's been happening for years, but you and I, Paul, know we're old enough to know that isn't how life works.
It's not.
But it's about being resilient.
It is.
Again, we're coming back to that word. So I strongly believe that it's not the events in our life that cause us stress. It's how we think about them and how we perceive them and how we're going to cope and manage with them.
So that's critical, because one of the reasons for us starting the podcast was because we were really passionate about the lived experience of individuals and sharing that so that others could benefit and take what they wanted or what they needed from those stories. And I think back to the communication piece, it's really important to do that. So it's not that anxiety is across the board. You're seeing it prevalent everywhere. But is there a, and I'm not a blame person at all, because I don't think it's useful, but is there accountability to be had in the general media around how individuals are informed? So you use the great analogy of, students that have done all the hard work and they put all the yards in, and now all of a sudden, well, I've done that, so where's my reward? Is it, the perfect relationship? Is it the best job in the world with career prospects and a ton of cash and a lovely house and et cetera, et cetera? And that often doesn't happen. You have to wait for that stuff. But we're in a society that's now, right? So, and I'm just wondering whether that's not the fault of the individual, and I'm not saying it's anyone's fault, but I don't think that story is told in the right way. I think it's artificially told, even through simple media like, advertisements. But I think we could be doing more, and I don't know how to suggest we address that information kind of giving culture in the wider media.
Yeah. You're talking about the Instagram life, everything that's put out there, reality shows where everything's looking perfect. And they're not reality. So they're called reality shows, but they're not reality. So you're quite right. We need real people out there talking about their real life, everyday stuff. And as you mentioned there, having the car and having the job and having the house, that isn't actually what brings you happiness.
It's not. It's really not. But that's
really not.
And again, coming back to you understood. the whole mobile application is around self-discovery, self-awareness, and finding happiness and joy and discovery in those things is a journey in itself. And once you know what those things are, and those things could be people, they could be pets, they could be locations, they could be activities, they could be the environment, could be a raft of things, and is likely, by the way, to be a raft of things. And those things aren't static. So again, it's a life journey as you take in more information from things around you, from people around you, from your own life journey. That's the crucial bit. But Gin, you couldn't have hit the nail better on the head. People, in my experience, people aren't going through that cathartic self-discovery journey. They're looking for the quick answers. They're looking for, how do I address this void, this gap now? Maybe I'll go and get a new car. Maybe I'll find a new relationship. Maybe I'll get some new clothes. Maybe, and it's too easy. It's too fixed, and it doesn't last. It just doesn't last.
It's just not sustainable.
No.
So there's something called hedonistic habituation, where if you feel that buying a new car will take you right up here, I'm feeling really happy.
Yep.
Now, everybody knows, like, buy a new car, that doesn't last too long, because the car's not new as soon as you drive it off the forecourt, is it? So that your level comes down. Then you're looking for the next high.
Yep. And
you're getting habituated at this high level. You want to stay at that level, but it's just not sustainable.
Similar trends in kind of addiction and things, right?
Yes,
you're always,
that's exactly how addiction works. Yeah, you're looking for the next high, the next high. It doesn't work like that.
It doesn't work.
And actually, all technology is designed that way.
Yes.
Technology is designed in a way that you are flicking through, looking for the next dopamine hit.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And in most things, we are a consumer. But in technology, just like addicts, you're called a user. There's a reason for that.
Powerful, isn't it? Powerful.
Yeah.
So
you are a user.
Absolutely. So I wanted to talk then about, you talked about accountability, and I wanted to touch on the types. I mean, anonymously, give me the profile of the best client you could have, because you know that you're going to have the biggest impact on that client and help them kind of navigate their own journey. So talk about what that looks like, and probably what it doesn't look like, because I'm sure that you have people approaching you that are looking for help, but actually you may consider referral or somewhere else, because you know your techniques, your approach probably aren't going to work with that person. Yeah. So talk to us about that, Gin.
Yeah. Oh, one of my favorite questions is, so the perfect person that comes to me is often someone who has had anxiety for years, but will say, and will often say as well, Gin, I don't know why I'm anxious. I've got a good life. I've got a great family. I've got a good job, but I'm just anxious all the time. I am worried about things. I am not going out and socializing. I am comfort eating. I'm drinking too much, and I don't know what my problem is. Yeah, I might have had some trauma in my past, but I know that happened. But like I said, a lot of people will say this because that's the anxiety response, is a fear response. You're just scared of something irrationally. So a lot of people will say, I don't even know what I'm anxious about. So to see a therapist is scaring me, because I'm like, what are we going to dig up from my past?
And they don't want to go back there, right? That's the point.
Exactly. And I don't want to go back there as well. So I call myself a therapist that doesn't need to hear your problems.
That's significant language, isn't it? And yeah. In some part of my brain, that's really refreshing.
Yeah. Good. But I know it doesn't make sense, because we've been taught that in order to fix a problem, we have to go back and find where that problem is. Yep. And start digging into it, then fix it, then come out again. But you know what? Your brain's not an engine. It doesn't work like that. It's much more sophisticated. We've got to start understanding how the brain works. People have got to get this. Going back and finding I'm going to put it in inverted commas, root cause,
yep,
is, for me, it's just not beneficial. So you've probably heard the phrase, your mind doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. Okay. So let's say you've had a trauma that happened in your past. So let's say you had a very bad car accident. and it happened in your past. Now, if you go to a therapist and you're going to keep talking about that accident and why did it happen and where did it go and what did you think was wrong with that, you're reliving it again.
Right.
So you've not now had that accident once, you've had it 20 times. Because that reliving and reliving and reliving. And now, why on earth, if you've had an accident 20 times, why on earth would you get in a car? Your brain's saying, do not go anywhere near a car.
Because the anxiousness is rising, right?
You're fueling your own anxiety.
Interesting.
So we've got to start creating the shift of and looking at where you are now and what is it that you want. And this is an example of someone I've actually had as a client that said, Gin, I need to get back in the car again. I need to drive to work every day. So we should now be focusing more on that because that's how the mind works. If you are going to keep reliving the problems of the past, it's happened and it's happened and it's happened. It's happened 20 times. And so by analyzing the problem, we're not getting anywhere. I'll give you another example. Let's say, Paul, you went to a restaurant and you're really hungry and the waiter comes over to you and says, so, sir, when did this hunger start? And when can you remember when you were first hungry? And what's your hunger like now?
Yeah.
And what do you think is the solution to this hunger? But were there other times you were hungry as well? Like, what would you do? You'd get up and walk out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
You need to eat first. Now, because I'm solution focused, it doesn't mean I'm problem phobic. But what I want to do is I want you to eat your dinner first. And then you can start looking at how to prevent hunger next time. Once you feel a bit better, you've got to feel better first. So we've got to treat the problem first by not analyzing the problem, by making you feel better. And then once you've got more objective, rational brain control, you can start looking at the problem again, if that's what you wanted to do. But 99% of my clients will say, oh, it's in the past, Gin. I'm just going to forget about it. I cannot be bothered. I'm so sick to death of going over it and reliving it. Actually, I can see the good points. It also taught me a lesson.
Because there's progress and it's tangible and they feel it, right? So if you're, and that's the foothold, isn't it? If you can get a foothold, you're encouraged and motivated to continue looking forward versus looking backwards, right? Do you cause? I imagine you going into kind of peer settings and everyone sitting back and going, "Oh my goodness, Gin, you can't say that." Does that happen? Does that happen?
All the time. So I'm often at a networking call and I'll say, you have to introduce yourself, don't you? So I'm Gin. I'm a therapist. I don't need to hear about your problems. I believe in it's very much important where you are now and going forward. And we'll go around the room and another therapist will say, well, I believe you need to get to the root cause. You need to get to the root cause. Okay. I'm like, that's fine. Because there's, what do they say? Courses for horses or horses for courses?
Horses for courses, but it is true, right? I think you can't have a one size fits all. And it's good that people out there are trying different things and looking at things differently.
Yes.
So in terms of prevention then, or forward looking versus rearward looking, let's put it simply, you must have a myriad of bits of guidance, advice, experience that you can pass on. And I know that a lot of that is baked into a recent book that you've published.
Yes.
So tell us the title. Oh, look at this! Look at this!
Shameless plug.
Okay, so how to empty your stress bucket. Yes. So give us a summary. Give us an Amazon review of
Amazon review. This will change your life. It's a book I've started. I started writing this book as a script to my signature presentation, which is called How to Empty Your Stress Bucket.
Okay.
And in it, I talk about how the brain works, but in a very easy to understand way. So I talk about that you've got an intelligent part of your brain and you've got a caveman primitive part of your brain. And if a polar bear was to appear, you would go into fight or flight or freeze. And that's a perfectly normal response, except that response from caveman days has not evolved with us very well into modern day times. So fight or flight or freeze is now anger. So fight is anger, flight is anxiety, and freeze is depression and low mood.
You're definitely educating me now, Gin.
Good.
Definitely educating me.
And I go more into that. The other things that happen when we see a polar bear is we're going to catastrophize because we're going to think, oh, this isn't a cuddly polar bear. I'm going to die.
Guilty. I'm a big catastrophizer.
So you're in your primitive brain. It's catastrophizing. It's just trying to look after you.
Yep.
Well, that's what it's trying to do.
Yep.
Then you're going to be obsessional. You're going to keep a check on that polar bear, aren't you?
Yes.
Is it there or is it gone?
Absolutely.
And then you're vigilant for more polar bears. There could be another polar bear around the corner. And you're not going to be creative for solutions. You need to make a quick decision there and then. Now, all those characteristics are brilliant if you were to bump into a polar bear in central Edinburgh. But the likelihood of that happening now is zero. So what we've got now is we've still got that part of our brain that treats everything like a polar bear. But our polar bears are now full email inboxes. The bills coming through the door. The kids, worrying about the kids, health anxiety, there's financial anxiety, what's going on with the world, environmental anxiety. We've just found different polar bears. But intelligently, we know this isn't a polar bear situation, but your primitive brain will kick in because it's feeling stressed.
That's a really interesting analogy. So does that problem or that challenge or the creation of polar bears that actually aren't polar bears, does that become more of an issue unless you start to tackle it, or yes. It does? Okay, yeah. So you've got to catch it, right?
Yeah, this is what piles into your stress bucket.
Got it.
So when I was saying it's not the events in your life, it's your thoughts. So the more, it's a vicious circle. The more you think negatively, you're going to fill up your stress bucket. The more that's in your bucket fuels this primitive brain. So what we've got is this primitive brain in us that is kind of like old hardware that we've had for millennia, but it's never had an upgrade. What we've got instead is we've got the prefrontal cortex, the intelligent brain, has come forward. So when we see those evolutionary pictures, haven't we, that a human being's head has come forward, forehead. That's the intelligent brain. That's a whole load of new software we've glommed on to the old hardware.
Now you're talking my language, Gin. Now you're talking my language.
Let's get techie. And so the dialogue between these two parts of the brain is now what's causing the problem. Your primitive brain's thinking polar bear alert.
Yep.
But your new software, the intelligent brain, is saying, no, it's not a polar bear. It's a stressful situation, but it's not a polar bear level of threat. Come on, calm down. And that's what I get people to focus on.
And that's a training opportunity, I guess, right? In effect, you're just just training the brain.
That's exactly what I do. Yeah.
Okay.
I train the brain.
And do you so deviation again, but outside of the sessions that you have one-to-one or with organizations, do you specifically do training, or is it more around kind of workshops and one-to-one sessions that you focus your skills on?
Yeah. I love my one-to-one work because that's where I can get really specific.
Yeah.
I do workshops and talks for organizations.
Okay.
As well, and it opens up the discussion again. We're going back to what we talked about earlier. We open up the discussion because I use language that includes stress bucket, polar bear, caveman brain. If we talk about fight or flight or freeze, that's easier to talk about than anger, anxiety, and depression, isn't it?
Yep.
But it's the same thing.
Yeah, and encouraging that conversation, having acknowledgement around the emotions that are in an organization and that are prevalent and that may not actually be anything to do with the organization, but employees are bringing that stuff into the organization. If those emotions are prevalent, they're going to be appearing in the way people talk and collaborate with each other, work together, talk to suppliers, external, internal stakeholders, talk to customers. Yep. So understanding what those emotions are is absolutely critical. Yep. And again, encouraging the communication and collaboration is critical too. But I wonder whether you see in those sessions the penny dropping. And do you actually see that happen when somebody goes, hold on, that's me. That's me.
All the time. Yeah. All the time, just because of the way I describe it.
Yeah.
I'm keeping that language simple. I'm trying to actually bring a bit of humor into it sometimes as well. Come on,
careful.
It's a serious subject. Yeah, but we've got, if we can bring that in, we're going to start talking about it. But I loved what you said there. You've got to bring your whole self to work.
Yes.
Like employers and leaders need to remember this. Do you want the whole person to come to work? Of course you do.
Yeah.
You're going to get maximum productivity, maximum performance out of this person.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then the responsibility, the accountability, where does that lie? Does it lie with the individual? Does it lie with the company? Does it lie with a therapist? I think it is a bit of a collaboration as well. But we've got to start getting honest with ourselves. So you're quite right. If there's a problem going on at home,
yep,
it will affect your work.
Yep.
But some work cannot do too much about it. They might be able to say, well, we can let you go 15 minutes early if that helps you. We can let you have an hour off to see a therapist if that helps you.
Yep.
They might be able to do something there. But then the responsibility does lie with you as a person. And that's why I don't think I would ever give up my one-to-one work, because seeing that change in people so rewarding.
I bet it's rewarding, and something that's missing in what I would call kind of standard traditional commercial life, right? And part of the reason I sit on a charity board because that feeling of making an impact, making a difference is second to none, right? It's second to none. And I think there's an important part you talked about there, which was, once the penny drops and the conversation starts, really that's the beginning of the process, right? That's the beginning of the process. Yeah. But that's the opportunity for everyone, because before that opportunity didn't exist, right? So really strong. So we're gonna give a few copies of the book away, autographed by your good self, for those who sign up and feel that they can benefit the most from it. So thank you very much for that gesture. Lovely gesture. Wanted to just touch on a couple of additional things before we wrap up. So I wanted to come back on your comments around polar bears, and specifically kind of emails becoming polar bears, right? But it's not just emails, is it? It's the constant alerts and the constant notifications from social media, from everything that's out there. Yeah. And it's, I get stressed by it, right? And I'm kind of aware of it, but I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of people that just don't really think about it and accept that situation as normal. So digital health, talk about your opinion on the benefits of digital health versus the downside and the negatives of digital health as you've seen it in your clients and as you've viewed it in the greater societal challenges.
Well, advantages first. There's a community to talk about mental health. There's these podcasts that you can listen to help yourself with mental health. There's apps to help you with that as well. So that's the plus side. But what we're not doing is not allowing our mind to switch back, or our brain to switch back to something called the default mode network. Now, the next time you go in a coffee shop, Paul, I want you to look around while you're waiting in the queue. Even while you're waiting in the queue, how many people are scrolling through their phone?
Lots.
We do not allow ourselves to get bored anymore.
We don't.
It's really important to get bored. Paul,
that's the creative time, isn't it? That's the creative time, right?
Your brain is switching. It's not, people think they're switching off when they do that. Oh no, because we're so used to having this external stimulus. You use the right word. Yeah. We feel stimulated by those things, and we're conditioned to look for the next dopamine kick as we scroll through our Instagram posts or whatever it is, or we should be checking this and we should be checking that, and we should be doing 3 things at the same time. So we're trying to answer an email, and we're scrolling social media, and we're trying to watch a film as well. You're not doing that. You're not multitasking. What you're doing is you're firing different neurons in your brain, and it's getting a very mixed message. The minute you stop and daydream or get bored, your mind switches over to something called the default mode network, where different parts of your brain that have not been probably activated for a long time because they're so used to stimulus are now starting to fire up. And these are our creative centers. These are our problem-solving centers. what we're doing is we're looking back in our life and trying to combine these disparate problems that we've got, and we're trying to come up with a solution subconsciously. It's something to do with our subconscious. We still don't know everything about it. And the perfect example of that is, I'm sure people have had this. I get this all the time. You're sitting at your desk with a problem and you're trying to brainstorm. And maybe you've got a team together to brainstorm. And you're thinking, okay, so we've done something. But you get up and you go for a little walk at lunchtime, hopefully without your headphones, and you just daydream, and you come back and all of a sudden the solution to that problem pops up.
Yep. Well, people talk about being in the shower as well. Same kind of thing, right? Similar.
Exactly the same, yeah. That's when your best ideas come to you. So you're not switching off, you're switching over to something called the default mode network. And we've got to do that more. So that is why we should be putting down our phones. So next time you're in a coffee shop queue, do not look at your phone. Daydream.
Can we agree on this podcast that we're going to have joint IP on the slogan, get bored? Get bored.
Yes.
Right?
Oh,
is that fair? Right, let's do that.
I'll
let's
second
do that.
that.
Okay,
and
perfect.
Carried.
All right, as we wrap up, I want to just squeeze a couple of additional things in. So when you're in the mental health world, an ecosystem, it tends to be this bucket that's very specific. And I'm mindful all the time that we aren't just a manifestation of our mental health. We're not just a manifestation of our physical health, which, by the way, is up and down very much like the mental health journey. So just a couple of comments on how important it is to include physical health when we're having mental health conversations. So in your view, is it important, is it critical, or actually, if we just focus on the mental health, then the physical health follows behind?
It's paramount, Paul, paramount. If we go back through evolution, when we used to live in our tribe properly, and we did our hunting and gathering properly, and we looked after each other properly, we felt good. And when we felt good, we wanted to do more of those things.
Yep.
And we know now from science that wasn't a magical mystery feeling, that feel-good feeling. It was a flow of neurotransmitters, hormones. Everything was flowing in as biologically really well. The main one I talk about is serotonin.
Okay.
So your serotonin flows when we do those things like our ancestors did.
Yep.
Now, we can't go out and club a woolly mammoth over the head now. So what we do now is we do something called, I call it the 3 Ps.
Okay.
So we need to do positive activity. We need to have positive interactions. And we need to do some positive thinking. And if we do those 3 Ps, and if we do them regularly and consistently, we're going to get our serotonin flowing, which means we're going to want to do more of them. So positive activity was the first one you saw there.
Yep.
Now, that doesn't mean hitting the gym. If you don't like the gym, that's not your positive activity. The example I always use is, everyone's running, Paul. So I've got a best friend. She loves running. And she's always like, come on, Jen, come on a run with me. You'll get the runner's high. I'm like, please, no, do not drag me on a run. I am happy in the yoga studio. Thank you very much.
Oh, very nice.
So that's my positive activity.
Got it.
So it's got to be positive for you.
For you, yeah.
And then the positive interactions, because we're a community, we've got to feel connected. So the other thing we need to get rid of is, the self-service checkouts.
Yes.
Get rid of them.
Because they don't encourage the interaction, right?
No. Those micro interactions we can have every day are brilliant.
And they top us up, I guess, right?
Top us up.
Yeah.
And they're actually probably feeding social anxiety.
Wow.
Because we've now got ways to do things where we don't have to interact with anyone. We can now sit in our homes, excuse me, from an app, we can order food delivered to our door. We're not doing any hunting and gathering now, are we?
The word convenience is often used in many scenarios. And when you actually drill down on it, is it really convenient? Right? Convenient in the wider sense?
Long-term inconvenience.
It's probably very inconvenient longer term. Goodness me. Okay. So positive activity, positive interactions. What was the last one?
Positive thinking.
Thinking,
I don't use that phrase flippantly. I don't really quite like it very much. Positive thinking. People who are depressed, they know they have to think positive.
Yeah.
It's not as easy as flicking a switch at the back of your head to do that.
Yeah.
But the easiest way to do that, and it's how all my sessions begin, actually, because remember, I'm a therapist that doesn't need to hear your problems. I would say to you, hi, Paul, lovely to see you. Tell me what's been good about your week this week. What's been good?
So that immediately you're getting that person to think and latch on to positive thoughts, right?
Yes. And get into your intelligent part of your brain. That's the brain training.
Is there something?
What else has been good?
Oh, that's brilliant. And is there something there in terms of what am I thinking now? I'm thinking about kind of gratitude and you know, mantras and things like that. So a bit maybe a bit cheesy, but that way of thinking in terms of I might have had a really rubbish day, but actually I'm grateful for this, right? That's something positive to think about, right?
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, I'll wrap up on the last thing. There's clearly a significant challenge out there for a lot of people. I think the latest numbers are 1 in 4, I think, that are unable to manage the ups and downs of life, and they need help from somewhere. And that help may come in what I call soft form. So it might be going out for a coffee with a friend and having a bit of cake and just a chat, like you said, those little tiny interactions, micro interactions. I love that. But it could be all the way through to booking an appointment with you, Gin, or to something, you know, more significant where there has to be an intervention. But I don't see the prevalence, the breadth, and the availability of those services, whether it's clinical or more soft services, really changing in a way that matches the demand, if that's the right word, but hopefully you understand what I mean. So then it's about how do we continue to empower? And I think you've actually, to be fair, I think you've answered that question already around, you know, the accountability, the empowerment, and those 3 Ps. But, you know, it's not going to change, is it? It doesn't look as if it's going to change. And if it does change, it's not changing in a meaningful way. So it's really important that we take control as individuals and as communities and as a society and take control of what we can control, right? So just to finish on that, and not to be too negative, but I just want people to cling on to something if they're in a tough space, right? And it's little victories, it's little wins that really give the foothold. So just to finish off on that would be great.
The thing with mental health is you've got to be consistent. It's not like taking a tablet that for an aspirin for your headache, that you're immediately going to notice a difference. You have to make small, and the steps don't have to be big. The reason we don't want to change is because we look at the big change. Small steps, a 10-minute walk every day will make a difference. Putting in your diary that every Friday afternoon you're going to meet your best friend for a coffee, or you're going to invite them round. But be consistent and don't look for an immediate effect. The other thing I'd really like to say, though, is to therapists and people, educators in the mental health space, stop making therapy a mystery and get the content out there. Start educating people. Start informing people. Hints, tips, anything you can do, workshops, classes, if that's what you want to do. Get it out there. People still have got this mysterious thing around therapy. You know what? It's talking therapy, but we're talking in a way that helps you train your brain, whether you want to get to the root cause or not. I'm not denying that there's some people where that is useful. There is a place for that.
Yeah.
I don't do it because that's what I believe, which means that I might not be the therapist for you.
Yeah.
I totally take that on board. Hands up. I might not be right fit for you. But the more therapists and educators that are out there informing, the more, and informing with real tangible, useful hints, tips, ideas, that's great. And from the other side, from the consumer side, you take those tips on board and you do them. You have to do them because no one's here to save you. You've got to do it yourself. That might sound harsh, but honestly, with mental health, it's only you that can do something about it. And you can. I absolutely believe we've all got the ability to do it. It's just something needs to change. And it's just reading that one sentence in one book. It's hearing that one podcast episode. It's just, seeing something on an app, something on social media that will create a change immediately.
And the consistency.
So keep at it.
Start small, but keep at it. Yeah. What a wonderful positive note to end on, and a lovely call to action for those involved in educating as well. I can't thank you enough. Thank you again for the gesture. If you want a signed copy of Gin's book, lots of useful advice and great tips in there, get in touch. We've only got a few copies, but if you feel like you can benefit, please get in touch. Gin, can't thank you enough. Thank you so much. I love the authenticity and the transparency of the conversation. And just really appreciate you spending the time. I know people are going to benefit from it. So have a wonderful rest of the day.
Angie, thank you so much, Paul. And remember, what's been good about your week? Always start a conversation with that. What's been good today?
Love it. Thanks, Gin.
Cheers. Thank you.